Oh, Hannah, I'm just going to invite you to unmute.
Okay, how's that?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so thank you again. That was great music. That was super. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about context when we look at different topics like disability, for instance. I myself have been, played a lot of different roles in my life. I've been a daughter, a sister, I've been a homeowner, I've been a student, I've done some teaching, I've been an author, I've been a lot of different things. I've been a guide dog owner so I've lived a life in a lot of different contexts. But I have to tell you that as soon as somebody says the word blind to describe me, all of a sudden, all of those other accomplishments and roles that I've had just seem to slide into the background, and the foreground is all about this word blind. Or for other people, it could be another kind of disability, for instance. So, and I really wonder, why is that? Why does one word overshadow so many things? And I'd like to ask you to think about that in your lives too, when you've maybe met people with disabilities, or when you yourself heard Heather say that I am blind, or that my husband was blind. And so it's all about seeing people in context, I believe. And I think our society has been so trained to look on disability in a negative way, and having a disability is really, really hard in a lot of ways. But like driving a car, if you think back to the first time you stepped into and sat in a car to drive, you were nervous, you didn't have experience, it was a scary thing. And I kind of liken that to starting life out differently after an injury or an illness or something. And in my case, I was 11 years old when I lost my vision to a cancerous brain tumor that they didn't find for about 4 years. So by then my optic nerves were very badly, irreparably damaged. And so I became a visually impaired person then. And I went to a school for the blind for several years, which I totally enjoyed, because I was just like everybody else there. I wasn't sort of that marginalized person again. I was kind of in my right context at a school for the blind, because everybody else did the same thing, lived life the same way I did. We all read Braille. We all were more careful about where we put things, and remembering what color our clothes were, and just all of those things. But that all comes from a Malcolm Gladwell concept called the 10,000 hour rule. And Malcolm Gladwell is a writer and sort of social scientist. And he coined that term because he says that if you do something for 10,000 hours, you can't help but be good at it. So he uses examples like the Beatles, for instance, that played in all these dingy pubs and everything for years before they actually made it big. And even if you think of yourself as like our beautiful pianist today, I mean, I'm sure she can think back and say that she's put in her 10,000 hours and then some. So I kind of add sort of that overview effect context. If you add add the 10,000 hour rule, where you practice the skill you need to practice, you'll be good at it. So you went out driving and practiced your skills and shifting and parking and all this. Well, when I lost my vision, I had to develop skills. I learned Braille. I learned Braille when I was like 11 years old. I pretty much taught myself over the course of a summer, and before I went to school at Jericho in the fall. So it's not rocket science. I learned it as a kid. So, it's just it's something that looks really different and impossible to you. But the only reason it looks impossible to you is because you don't know anything about it. So I really challenge you in your thinking, like why you feel that way or think that way. Part of it might be you just don't know about it. And, we're trained so much as even as young children, not to ask people in the grocery store or something like, how did you go blind? Or, how come you're in a wheelchair? And parents always shush kids. And I really encourage you to let your kids ask questions, because, they're not scared of the person in the wheelchair. You're kind of teaching them to not go near that person, right? But go near them, say hello, and ask them those questions. Most people don't mind answering because it's awareness, and that's what we want to create as people with disabilities, for sure. So I went back to regular high school after several years at Jericho. At that point in time, the school board system here in BC, and actually most places, was instituting a program of integration, so that they wanted disabled kids in the classroom with, quote, normal kids, and that would be fair to everybody and create a better sort of environment. So we were always just part of the group and not marginalized at schools, in a different city altogether. And it's a good theory in practice, but in reality, you end up being you go from being one of many blind students in a school to being the only blind student in a school. And that's pretty isolating again. So while the concept of integration is great, it does, the effect, the outcome isn't always quite what we were going for. And so I finished school there, and I went to, I had a lot of different jobs growing up, mostly sort of office type jobs. And then finally later in life now, I was able to go back to university and got a master's degree in writing. And that's one of the reasons I was asked to write my book, was we had publishers come to our classrooms to talk to us throughout our education. And one of the publishers came to the classroom and saw me and my guide dog. That was my last guide dog, Calvin. And so when it came time to find somebody to write this book about disability, they wanted somebody with the lived experience. And I definitely have that. I have like probably 50 years of it, almost 50 years of it. So that's what sort of got me into the position of being able to be considered to write this book. So the book is kind of a primer on disability, kind of like everything you ever wanted to know about disability, but were afraid to ask. It's kind of all in there, and it's meant for late teen readers, but it's a great read for anybody, really. So, and that was thanks to Orca Book Publishing here in Victoria. They're very progressive about tackling hard subjects. And I really commend them for, taking on a subject like this, because disability is all around us. It's, I'm sure many of you in the congregation today know people with disabilities or have them in your family. So, and if you don't know, there are a lot of injustices when you have a disability. I mean, I use a guide dog, and I am chronically asked to leave premises, restaurants, stores, or taxi drivers don't want to take the dog in the car. I mean, it's against the law, but it happens all the time. So that's sort of a kind of daily living injustice that goes on a lot. Employment is a huge injustice, or I should say unemployment in the disabled community. For blind people specifically, it's about the 85% mark for people that are blind are also unemployed. And that's a real tragedy in any society, that you have 85%, of your population that have disabilities that aren't able to contribute. I mean, even think about your own workplaces, when you look around, and are there people with disabilities around you? Like, I think for the most part, as much as laws and incentive programs and everything do try to address the problem, I mean, marginalization is still a real problem today for people with disabilities. But I would challenge you to think about the kind of skill level people like me and others have. I mean, we're great problem solvers. I mean, we have all these problems in our life. Clearly, we have to find solutions for them. We're good at, amassing a team around us to help us in our no, I wouldn't say to help us, but to help us out from time to time with problems. And, we're good at finding resources to make things happen. And I mean, if you have a neighbor with a disability, or if you work with someone with a disability, I mean, take another look at them. Take a look at them in the context of the 10,000 hour rule. They're accomplished people in what they are. I'm like I mentioned before, I'm a wife, I'm a widow, I'm a homeowner, a dog owner, and all that. But all of those things I've worked on for years and years and hours. So I always tell people I'm good at being blind, and I am. So and so are other people with disabilities. We're good at managing our own lives. We don't expect people around us to do that for us. So I would really challenge you to think about your own reaction to when you see somebody on the street, maybe in a wheelchair or using a guide dog or a white cane. Like, what are those first thoughts that go through your mind? And ask yourself, like, how did you come to believe what you believe about the people that you're looking at, and what you think they're capable of, and what you think their lives might be like? So, and I would also challenge you to make contact of some kind. Like, don't be afraid to make contact. Look at somebody in a wheelchair and smile at them and say, hey, good morning. Don't, because that barrier that exists, I think communication and caring is what we need to bridge that gap between marginalization, that otherness feeling many of us have with the general society. So, I mean, use communication to bridge that gap, because I think that's the first step, is getting to know other people and how they live. I mean, it's kind of like living in a different land. Like, I've earned my passport to this blindness world I live in, and it's a different culture, and you don't know about that. So I challenge you to learn a little bit more about the different disability cultures all around you. So thank you very much again for having me speak to you. I hope I didn't go over time, Heather.
Thank you very much.